So we go to branch A. Before we can replicate, we have to also configure. So we press configure. Again, I'll show you the code in a minute. I just want to show you first the scenario working. And we'll replicate to branch A, and it appears. Here we have a little log. So that's implemented with the events I showed you. I'll show you how it's done. It's very simple. Just so we know what's going on. If I replicate again, it says nothing to replicate because the little log is now empty. Okay. In fact, if we go back and look at the log, we should see one line left because we haven't replicated for branch B. So the branch A line is gone, and the line for branch B is still there. Okay. Now back here, branch B. So same thing. We configure first. The configuration has to be done once, of course, but afterwards it's work. Okay, so it works. Now, so that's the most simple scenario. I'll show you the code for that. Configure head office database. We have a CCC config connect object. Have to set the link to the database connection object. So head DB, that's this thing right here. I call connect, and I call generate triggers for table products. And disconnect, that's all. Okay, that's for creating the metadata and the triggers. Branch A, exactly the same code, except that it's a different database. And replicate to branch A. So I disconnect and I reconnect. It's better to use two different connection objects. But anyway, and I call replicate, and that's it. When you call replicate, it'll read the RPL log table. It does everything it needs to do. It detects conflicts.
If now you create a branch C and set up a replication, did you need to update the products table for doing the replication to branch C? Or there is an initial replication of the table?
There isn't any initial replication. There's a method in the CC replicator called batch import, which allows you to do a batch import. But it's not really replication, and it's better to use the batch import because if you use what you could do is theoretically you could do update set code equals code, you know. But the problem is it'll go to everyone, and the second problem is that it's much slower than a batch import. Because it'll do one record at a time. So using that method, you can just in one line of code, you write batch import. Well, I won't get into that now. But you write batch imports. Yeah, you give the table name, and you give SQL a condition. It does a select, it gets the records, and pops them down. Okay. So for replicating, there's nothing else involved. You just call replicate, and then if there are conflicts, you'll get an event to tell you there's conflicts. If there's any error, you'll get an event. If there's when it's finished, you get an event to tell you that it's finished, etc. But that's all there is to it. And for branch B, of course, it's exactly the same thing. Okay, just the database connection changed, and for replication, it's also the same. And that's all there is. That's all there is to this code for this simple scenario. So I'll show you another scenario for the customers. Okay. Just before we go to that, back on the CC replicator, there's one important detail which I didn't explain a minute ago, which is right here. The names of the nodes here need to correspond to the name that you put in the RPL users table. So right here we created, in the head office database, we created in RPL users here, we created two rows. That corresponds to the two nodes towards which we want to send our data. The names you put here in the login field have to correspond to the names you use in Copycat, because otherwise it won't know which rows to take, of course. Okay, That's important because if ever you don't do that, it won't work at all. So you won't understand why. Okay, and that's all. Now, for the customers table, it's going to be the same scenario, except there's going to be one difference, is that for the customers we want, as I said a minute ago, I want branch A to only see his own customers and branch B his own customers. So we have to do one thing that's different, which we have to create a replication condition, and that's done in the replication tables which we have over here. So that's configured in RPL tables. Here we have a list of all the tables in the database. And you have to you have various options you can set for that will affect the trigger creation. Okay, so these do you replicate the inserts, the updates, the deletes? By default, it's all yes, but you could say only inserts, for example, it would only replicate one way, like that, and doesn't show correctly. What we're going to use right here is the condition. So this is the condition. It can be any SQL condition. It'll be inserted in the triggers. So when it creates the triggers, it'll use the condition you said. The idea here is we're going to match between the RPL user's login field and the branch field of the customers table. So I'll show you the customers table right here. It's very simple. An ID, primary key, a branch. So here, by the way, to illustrate Raphael's point earlier on, we have a double primary key with the ID and the branch, so that it can come back up and there's no problem. And we have to make it so that if we type branch A right here, it'll only go to branch A. Okay, so in order to do that, we simply write a condition here. We write U, so U represents RPL users. U login equals new. So new represents the table that you're working on because this is inserted inside the triggers. New dot branch. Okay, that's all. We commit. We return here. And right here, I'm going to uncomment this line. So now when we press that button again, we're going to generate the triggers for the customers table as well, using the condition we just created. If you'd already created the triggers, you would have to delete them and recreate them. Otherwise, you wouldn't take the condition into account. Yes. Well, yes, of course. There's in ccconfig there's a remove triggers method as well. Okay, so we call configure head office DB. And so now it's created the triggers. I can show them, but I don't have very much time. So refresh. Okay, there they are. And that should be all. One more thing we're going to do before we test is that I want to now create in the branches. So this is branch A. I go to RPL users. I'm going to create a user for the head office, so the data can go back up for the products table. Well, for any table, for which it has triggers. And same for branch B. RPL users. Okay. Now, so we have triggers for our customers table. We have a condition. So now let's create a new customer. We'll assign it to branch A. We'll call it branch A customer. And I have that same refresh problem. I have to do it again. Sorry. It's just my dataset component. I have a problem, but it doesn't make any difference to replication itself. Okay, there. And I'll make another one for branch B. Okay. Replicate to branch A. It only gets branch A customer. Replicate to branch B, and it gets a branch B customer. Okay. Simple. And okay, so one last thing I would like to show you. We can. I don't think we'll have time for more than that. I do. Yeah. Okay. Well, we can. If we have more time, I can show you more. But yeah. Yeah. I can show you more if we have time. Anyway. Even faster than I thought. So. But that'll give more time for questions. That's just as well. I would like to show you how we handle conflicts. That's, as we said earlier on, that's a very important issue, and it's going to happen unless you design very well. It's probably going to happen, so you need to know how it works. So just a minute ago, we went here in branch A and branch B, and we created an RPL users. We created a line for the head. Okay, that's done. So now we already have the triggers for we didn't do the customers. Yes, we did. Okay, we got the triggers for customers. Okay.